We will now decipher Helena Blavatsky's key doctrine, Isis Unveiled, the 150-year-old book that exposes reality's true nature. What if the solid world around you is merely a veil concealing forces so powerful they could transform all of humanity overnight? In 1877, a mysterious woman dared to tear this veil apart. Her name was Helena Blavatsky, and her book Isis Unveiled didn't just challenge Western thought, it declared war on it. This wasn't just another philosophical text, it was a revelation that threatened to shatter the foundations of both science and religion, exposing a hidden reality that powerful institutions desperately wanted to suppress.
There exists somewhere in this wide world an old book,
wrote Blavatsky, her words electrifying readers across continents.
So old that our modern antiquarians might ponder over its pages in indefinite time and still not agree as to the nature of the fabric upon which it is written.
This wasn't poetic flourish. It was her first clue about an ancient conspiracy of knowledge that has shaped human civilization from the shadows. How exactly does this 150-year-old book expose reality's true nature? By revealing that consciousness, not dead matter, creates and controls the universe. By proving that ancient civilizations possessed scientific knowledge we're only now rediscovering. By demonstrating that what we dismiss as paranormal is simply the operation of natural laws that modern science is too blind to see. While Victorian scientists dissected frogs and theologians debated angels, Blavatsky had spent decades infiltrating secret societies and hidden temples across Tibet, Egypt, and India. She emerged with evidence of a universal wisdom religion, an ancient doctrine preserved by initiated adepts who understood reality's true mechanics. Her mission? To challenge what she called the dogmatic assumptions imprisoning humanity, artificial limitations that prevent us from accessing our innate powers.
The Platonic philosophy,
Blavatsky declared,
affords the only middle ground between the two contending powers.
But this was no theoretical compromise. Isis Unveiled presents a reality where matter and spirit aren't opposing forces, but different frequencies of the same cosmic energy, a truth that could transform human consciousness itself. Throughout her explosive text, Blavatsky connects dots between seemingly disconnected traditions, revealing patterns too precise to be coincidence. She describes forces that could shatter in a second the work of years of common human labor. Powers, she insisted, weren't supernatural but entirely natural, albeit beyond conventional measurement. The keys to unlocking these forces, she revealed, lay in a forbidden science, the original meaning of magic, before religions corrupted it into superstition.
Magic,
she wrote,
was considered a divine science which led to a participation in the attributes of divinity itself.
This wasn't metaphor. She detailed specific techniques that initiates used to manipulate the hidden architecture of reality. Blavatsky's contemporaries were stunned by her claims that ancient Vedic texts contained advanced physics that modern science was only beginning to grasp, that Moses, according to her controversial research, had been initiated into Egyptian mystery schools, that Christ himself taught doctrines remarkably similar to Buddha's. The public devoured Isis Unveiled, making it an overnight sensation despite establishment efforts to discredit its author. The veil is lifting. The question is, are you ready to see what lies behind it? While modern science was still crawling in its infancy, an ancient science had already mapped the cosmos in its entirety. This is the explosive revelation Blavatsky unleashes in the early chapters of Isis Unveiled, a forgotten knowledge system she calls the Oriental Kabala.
The Kabbalah,
she writes,
is indeed of the essence of the old religion itself.
Not merely a collection of Jewish mystical texts, but a master key that unlocks every occult mystery across civilizations. Blavatsky deliberately uses this spelling, Kabbalah, not Kabbalah, to signal something shocking. This knowledge predates Judaism by thousands of years. It originated, she claims, with civilizations so ancient their very existence has been erased from conventional history. What makes this revelation so dangerous? The Oriental Kabbalah exposes reality as a mathematical code that anyone can learn to manipulate. a cosmic programming language that renders the difference between miracle and science meaningless.
The universe,
Blavatsky writes,
is built on symbols, and symbols are built on numbers.
this mathematical architecture, once mastered, allows consciousness to directly reshape matter, a power modern institutions would do anything to keep hidden. Here, Blavatsky drops her most incendiary bombshell. Magic isn't superstition, it's the original science.
Magic was considered a divine science, which led to a participation in the attributes of divinity itself.
She declares. This wasn't metaphorical. Ancient adepts could manipulate physical reality through precise techniques, not by violating natural law, but by accessing higher laws that modern science is too primitive to detect. The key distinction, Blavatsky reveals, is that these ancient practitioners recognized the conscious intelligence behind physical phenomena, the living mind within matter itself.
The key to the phenomena of nature,
She states,
lies in understanding that there is no such thing as dead matter. All is living, and every atom is alive.
this wasn't poetic metaphor, it was literal truth that explains abilities dismissed as miraculous by those too conditioned to understand them. Blavatsky's assault on scientific orthodoxy reaches its peak when discussing the Vedas, those ancient Indian texts modern scholars dismissed as primitive mythology. According to Blavatsky,
The Vedas contain a vastly more profound knowledge of the laws of nature than our physical science is likely to reach within some time to come.
she catalogues Vedic knowledge of sound vibrations that could shatter mountains, light phenomena that defy physics, and subtle energies that science has only begun to detect in the last decade. The most revolutionary aspect of this ancient science was its recognition that consciousness and matter aren't separate. They're different densities of the same primordial substance. While Victorian laboratories dissected dead tissues to understand life, ancient wisdom recognized consciousness as the fundamental reality from which matter manifests.
Every objective manifestation, whether it be the motion of a living limb or the movement of a cosmic body, requires two conditions: will and force.
The implications are staggering. If Blavatsky's research is correct and mounting scientific evidence suggests it was, then Western civilization has spent centuries traveling backward. The separation between mind and matter that defines modern science isn't progress, but regression. A deliberate fragmentation of knowledge designed to limit human potential. Through the lens of Isis Unveiled, we glimpse a version of reality where thought, intent, and will are as real and measurable as electricity or gravity, where trained consciousness can directly affect physical outcomes. This isn't New Age fantasy. It's the original understanding of how reality functions, preserved in symbols and texts that predate our civilization by millennia. The question isn't whether this knowledge is real. The question is who buried it and why don't they want you to have it? We are now reaching the beating heart of Blavatsky's revelation, the single concept that transforms everything you thought you knew about reality. Isis Unveiled exposes the existence of the astral light, not a poetic metaphor, but a tangible medium that permeates every atom of existence.
This universal agent
Blavatsky writes,
is the astral fire of the Hermeticists, the Akasha of the Hindus, and the ether of both modern physics and ancient philosophy.
but unlike the inert mechanical ether theorized by Victorian science, Blavatsky's astral light is alive with consciousness and potential, a living substance that records, transmits, and responds to thought itself. This revelation shatters the materialist paradigm at its core. The universe isn't empty space populated by dead matter. It's a living ocean of intelligent energy in which physical objects are merely frozen patterns. This living field, pulsing with information and consciousness, explains phenomena that materialistic science cannot acknowledge, despite overwhelming evidence. Blavatsky didn't merely theorize this medium, she detailed how ancient adepts manipulated it. When a fakir in India appears to levitate, she explains, he isn't violating gravity through supernatural means. According to Blavatsky's metaphysical framework,
He makes himself as positive as he can to attract the direct current and as negative as he can to the side current of the earth.
The process is as scientific as electromagnetics, just operating on a level conventional instruments can't detect. Perhaps the most explosive property of the astral light is its function as what Blavatsky calls the Akashic records, a cosmic recording medium that retains impressions of all events throughout time.
Upon the indestructible tablets of the astral light is stamped the impression of every thought we think and every act we perform.
This isn't mystical poetry. It's a precise description of an information-bearing field that preserves all experience. Modern physics struggles toward this same understanding with concepts like quantum fields and non-local information, yet mainstream science still hesitates at the threshold Blavatsky crossed 150 years ago, recognizing that consciousness itself interacts directly with this field. The elementals, nature spirits that populate mythology worldwide aren't superstition, Blavatsky explains, but natural forces personified, intelligences that exist within the astral light. These centers of force mediate between visible and invisible dimensions of reality, explaining everything from poltergeist phenomena to spontaneous healings that conventional science dismisses despite consistent documentation across cultures. One of Blavatsky's most provocative pieces of evidence is the quenchless lamp phenomenon, lights discovered burning in ancient tombs after centuries sealed away from oxygen or fuel. Rather than dismissing these well-documented accounts, she offers an explanation. Certain crystalline arrangements can draw energy directly from the astral light, suggesting principles that resonate with emerging theories of zero-point energy harvesting. These lamps weren't miracles, but technologies operating on principles we've forgotten. Through her exploration of these phenomena, Blavatsky reaches a conclusion that transforms our understanding of reality itself.
The universe is the combination of 1,000 elements and yet the expression of a single spirit, a chaos to the sense, a cosmos to the reason.
In this unveiled cosmos, reality includes dimensions that operate according to laws conventional science refuses to acknowledge, not because these dimensions don't exist, but because recognizing them would collapse the materialist paradigm that maintains current power structures. This perspective doesn't deny material reality, but reveals it as merely the outermost layer of a far more complex and conscious cosmos, one where information, energy, and consciousness interweave in patterns that the ancients understood, but modern institutions have systematically obscured. The veil thins. The question remains, who benefits from keeping humanity blind to the astral light's existence? In an age when Victorian science treated consciousness as a mere accident of brain chemistry, Blavatsky unveiled its true nature, the primary creative force in the universe. This section of Isis Unveiled doesn't just challenge materialism, it obliterates it, exposing the direct measurable pathways through which mind shapes physical reality.
The debt we owe to Paracelsus,
as she begins, invoking the 16th century physician whom conventional history dismisses as a quack, Blavatsky reveals what medical orthodoxy tried to bury. Paracelsus understood that
the human spirit is linked with the universal spirit,
a connection that allows consciousness to directly manipulate matter, energy, and even time itself when properly harnessed. Her most detailed evidence comes from her analysis of mesmerism, what we might call hypnosis and energy healing today. Far from the carnival sideshow depicted by skeptics, Blavatsky reveals mesmerism as the most important branch of magic, offering empirical proof that consciousness transcends the brain.
Mesmerism,
she writes,
is the most important branch of magic, and its phenomena are the effects of the universal agent which underlies all magic and has produced at all ages the so-called miracles.
This universal agent allows for the direct transference of life force between minds and bodies. Blavatsky documents numerous cases where adepts healed fatal injuries through conscious direction of this energy, phenomena modern medicine dismisses despite thousands of consistent cross-cultural records and growing laboratory evidence. Perhaps the most disturbing revelation in this section is Blavatsky's explanation of psychometry, the ability to extract information directly from objects without sensory input.
Every object in the natural world,
she explains,
is linked with the history of the past and has recorded upon it all that has happened.
This capacity demolishes the supposed boundary between information and physical reality, revealing that matter itself retains impressions of all it has witnessed. Modern skeptics might scoff, but DARPA and Russian intelligence agencies have quietly funded psychometry research for decades. The implications are too significant to dismiss. If consciousness can directly access information stored in matter, then reality is fundamentally different from the model we've been taught. Blavatsky's most profound challenge to conventional reality involves time itself.
Time is only an illusion produced by the succession of our states of consciousness as we travel through eternal duration.
This isn't philosophical speculation, but a description of how trained consciousness can move beyond linear temporal experience, a perspective that finds striking parallels in Einstein's later revelations about the relative nature of time. To support these explosive claims, Blavatsky cites the meticulous laboratory research of William Crookes and Sergeant Cox, respected Victorian scientists whose investigations into psychic phenomena produced repeatable documented evidence that consciousness can move objects, transmit information across distances, and even materialize physical substances. Their work should have revolutionized science. Instead, it was systematically suppressed because it threatened the materialist paradigm. Blavatsky distinguishes between genuine psychic phenomena and deceptive manifestations. She references what spiritualist Andrew Jackson Davis called dhyaka, manipulative entities of the astral plane that modern channelers and mediums often mistake for higher guidance. This classification system wasn't about superstition, but discernment, recognizing that the invisible dimensions of reality contain forces both beneficial and harmful. The world soul concept emerges as the unifying principle in Blavatsky's explanation. This cosmic consciousness permeates all existence and explains phenomena like healing by touch.
The willpower of the healing mesmerizer pours his own vital fluid through the eyes, the hands, or through the strong will of the healthy operator.
Through these revelations, Isis Unveiled presents a universe fundamentally different from the mechanical model that dominated Blavatsky's era and continues to limit ours. Reality isn't a collection of dead objects operating by blind forces, but a living, intelligent system where consciousness and matter exist in continuous dialogue. A perspective increasingly supported by quantum discoveries showing that observation itself determines physical outcomes. The question isn't whether Blavatsky was right. The evidence suggests she was. The real question is, why has this knowledge been systematically hidden from public awareness for over a century? History isn't what you've been told. Time isn't what you think it is. In perhaps the most revolutionary section of Isis Unveiled, Blavatsky shatters our linear concept of human development, exposing a cyclical pattern of rise and fall that explains both our forgotten past and our imminent future. The Egyptian circle of necessity emerges as the master key to understanding reality's true pattern. This ancient doctrine, Blavatsky explains, described the inevitable cycle that every human soul must perform during its evolution. While Darwin portrayed evolution as an upward trajectory from primitive to advanced, Blavatsky exposes a more complex truth. Consciousness cycles through periods of materialization and spiritualization, descent and ascent, forgetting and remembering. This cyclic model doesn't just reinterpret the past, it predicts the future. Blavatsky reveals that humanity stands at a critical threshold in 2025, poised between continued descent into materialism and the beginning of a spiritual renaissance that will transform civilization itself. The social upheaval, technological acceleration, and ecological crisis of our current moment aren't random. They're mathematically predictable aspects of this cosmic cycle. Root races, Blavatsky explains, represent the major divisions in human evolutionary development. This controversial concept, central to theosophical cosmology, describes not racial differences in the modern sense, but successive waves of human consciousness manifesting on Earth. She details how our current fifth root race, focused on intellect and material conquest, is approaching its climactic phase, with a transition to the more spiritually attuned sixth root race already beginning among certain children born since 2000. The most profound aspect of Blavatsky's cyclical revelation involves the triune nature of human beings. Beyond the physical body exists what she identifies as the astral body, known in Sanskrit as Kama Rupa, the higher mind, Manas, and the spiritual monad, Atma Buddhi. This multi-dimensional model of human nature demolishes the materialist reduction of consciousness to brain activity, explaining phenomena from near-death experiences to reincarnation memories that conventional science cannot address without contradicting its foundational assumptions. Elementals, those mysterious beings described in folklore worldwide, receive detailed explanation as Blavatsky reveals their true role in nature's economy. These aren't mere superstitions, but what she describes as nature spirits, forces personified that maintain the biosphere's subtle equilibrium. She cites the Neoplatonist Proclus on the beings of the air and provides various traditional names for these entities from different cultures, not as mythology, but as documentation of forces operating at levels beyond ordinary perception. The chapter contains urgent warnings about spiritual practice in our transitional age. Blavatsky distinguishes between high adeptship and problematic mediumship, cautioning that
mediumship risks passive possession, while adeptship demands disciplined mastery of occult laws.
This distinction becomes increasingly critical as more people spontaneously develop psychic sensitivities in response to Earth's rising vibrational frequency, a phenomenon documented in classified government studies since the 1950s. Throughout this section, Blavatsky integrates teachings from Hindu, Egyptian, Greek, and Hermetic traditions to demonstrate their common understanding of these cyclical laws. The similarities across cultures separated by continents and millennia can't be coincidence. They reflect observation of the same cosmic pattern by those with eyes to see it. This cyclical perspective transforms our understanding of both past and future, revealing human history not as a straight line of progress, but as a spiral path of spiritual evolution, temporarily obscured by materialistic thinking. In exposing reality's rhythmic nature, Blavatsky offers a framework that harmonizes science and spirituality within a unified cosmological system, one that explains our current global crisis as a necessary transition point in a larger pattern leading toward collective awakening. The evidence surrounds us. The pattern is clear. The only question is whether enough people will recognize it in time to navigate the coming transition consciously, rather than catastrophically. You are not who you think you are. This is perhaps the most shocking revelation in Isis Unveiled. Not a philosophical abstraction, but a concrete truth about your very existence.
Man is a duality,
Blavatsky declares,
in whom matter and spirit, the transitory and the eternal, are temporarily united.
This isn't poetic metaphor. It's the literal structure of human consciousness, and understanding it unlocks dormant abilities that would seem godlike by conventional standards. Blavatsky distinguishes between what she calls the inner and outer aspects of human nature.
The inner man,
She writes,
is their only reality, while the outer is a transitory illusion bound to perish with the body.
It explains why humanity remains trapped in materialism despite mounting evidence of larger realities. The outer senses perceive only the material universe, while the inner faculties, systematically atrophied by modern education, perceive dimensions beyond physical measurement. This duality reveals why science and spirituality appear to contradict each other when they're actually observing different layers of the same reality. The tragedy, Blavatsky explains, is that modern humans have been conditioned to identify exclusively with their outer nature, the temporary personality, while remaining oblivious to their inner nature, which connects directly to cosmic consciousness itself.
Per Felix arraigns the scientists.
Blavatsky begins, citing a Catholic theologian who ironically aligned with her critique of scientific materialism. Both recognize that a worldview excluding consciousness as a fundamental force cannot possibly explain reality's full spectrum. What makes Isis Unveiled revolutionary is that it doesn't just critique materialism. It provides the missing framework that integrates physical and metaphysical dimensions of existence. Blavatsky confronts Herbert Spencer's concept of the unknowable, his term for ultimate reality beyond human comprehension. Her counter-revelation is explosive. What seems unknowable to ordinary perception is directly accessible to those who have developed their inner faculties.
What is generally treated as unknowable,
she asserts,
is in fact the realm in which real knowledge begins.
This isn't mystical poetry, but a practical statement about consciousness development, one validated by thousands of consistent reports across cultures and eras. With characteristic directness, Blavatsky warns of the danger of evocations by tyros in magical practice. Those unprepared for contact with invisible dimensions risk attracting what ancient Romans called lares and lemures, astral remnants of deceased humans that can parasitize the living. This warning isn't superstition but practical protection, the extrasensory equivalent of warning someone not to perform surgery without medical training. Her detailed explanation of the secrets of Hindu temples provides empirical evidence for consciousness operating beyond physical limitations. These practices include techniques for temporarily separating the astral body from the physical, what modern research calls veridical out-of-body experiences, where subjects accurately report distant events while in trance states.
The Hindu yogi,
she explains,
produces his separations of himself into two persons by abstract meditation.
On reincarnation, Blavatsky presents evidence systematically excluded from Western education. She clarifies a critical distinction between the immortal spiritual monad and its temporary vehicles.
Reincarnation, i.e., the appearance of the same individual, or rather of his spiritual monad, twice on the same planet, is not a rule in nature, it is an exception.
This concept, she documents, was central to early Christianity, until Christian authorities at the Second Council of Constantinople in 553 CE deliberately suppressed it to maintain ecclesiastical power over the masses. The sacred Soma trance practiced by Hindu adepts provides Blavatsky with empirical evidence of consciousness functioning independently of the brain. This altered state allows access to information inaccessible to normal perception, a capacity increasingly documented in controlled studies of remote viewing and precognition that conventional science struggles to explain within its materialist framework. Through these revelations, Isis Unveiled establishes that the distinction between your inner and outer nature isn't merely philosophical but practical, with the inner spiritual aspect having causal power over physical reality when its laws are properly understood.
The soul possesses powers of locomotion,
Blavatsky writes,
which are almost unlimited as to distance and which surpass the velocity of electricity.
Modern research into non-local consciousness and quantum entanglement increasingly validates this once derided claim. This transforms our understanding of human identity by placing consciousness at the center, not as a byproduct of neural activity, but as the primary causative force in reality. In Blavatsky's unveiled cosmos, you are not merely a physical organism, but a multidimensional being, whose conscious potential extends far beyond the artificial limitations imposed by materialistic conditioning. The evidence is mounting, the veil is thinning. The only question is, will you continue identifying with your temporary outer nature, or awaken to the eternal reality of your inner being? What if the knowledge that could transform humanity has been hiding in plain sight for over a century? In the final sections of Isis Unveiled, Blavatsky doesn't just expose reality's hidden nature, she provides a practical roadmap for accessing it directly. This isn't theoretical philosophy, it's an activation key for dormant human capacities that would seem miraculous to the uninitiated. The most stunning phenomena Blavatsky documents come from her first-hand observations in India, where adepts demonstrated abilities that Western science dismisses, despite consistent cross-cultural verification. She recounts watching a yogi heal a broken bone in minutes through directed consciousness, not through faith healing but through precise manipulation of life force. The implications are revolutionary. If consciousness can reorganize biological systems this dramatically, then our entire medical paradigm requires radical revision. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the resuscitation of buried fakirs, extensively documented cases where yogis survived burial for weeks or months without oxygen. Blavatsky explains that these weren't stunts, but demonstrations of consciousness mastery over autonomic functions. Abilities that modern science now grudgingly acknowledges through studies of Tibetan Tummo practitioners who can raise their body temperature in freezing conditions through meditation alone. These phenomena expose reality's true nature by revealing the primacy of consciousness over seemingly fixed biological limitations. A critical distinction emerges between mediumship and adeptship that further illuminates reality's structure.
Mediumship is totally antagonistic to adeptship.
The former being passive surrender to external influences, while the latter represents active mastery over occult forces through trained will.
The medium is the passive instrument of foreign influences,
she explains.
The adept actively controls himself and all inferior potencies.
This distinction has become increasingly relevant as interest in channeling and psychic development surges without accompanying discernment, creating vulnerability to the very forces Blavatsky cautioned against. On the controversial subject of materialized spirits reported in seances, Blavatsky offers nuanced analysis. Some manifestations are genuine but misunderstood, not disembodied consciousness, but temporary forms created through the plastic power of the astral light, shaped by the collective consciousness of participants. This explanation clarifies phenomena that neither religious nor scientific frameworks can adequately address, revealing how reality's subtle dimensions respond directly to thought. The philosophy of levitation receives detailed explanation, as Blavatsky reveals the principles allowing adepts to neutralize gravitational attraction by aligning with specific currents in the astral light. This process operates through natural though hidden laws, precisely the kind of knowledge that threatens institutional power, by demonstrating that consensus reality is far more malleable than we've been taught. When examining ancient civilizations, Blavatsky challenges conventional archaeology regarding the origin of the Egyptians and their mighty engineering works. She provides evidence that Egyptian civilization descended from a far older tradition, preserving knowledge from prehistoric cultures whose very existence contradicts the official narrative of human development. The ancient land of the pharaohs preserved wisdom from earlier epochs, as evidenced by monuments displaying mathematical and astronomical knowledge supposedly impossible for their time. Most controversially, Blavatsky claimed that Moses was a priest of Osiris, who, according to her research, was initiated into Egyptian mysteries before founding Judaism. This assertion, while disputed by conventional historians, forms part of her larger revelation about the transmission of ancient wisdom through initiatic lineages that preserved humanity's true history across millennia, a history systematically obscured to maintain current power structures. Throughout these final chapters, Blavatsky integrates archaeological evidence, comparative religion, and esoteric philosophy to demonstrate that the magician aids, not impedes, nature by working with its higher laws. This perspective reveals reality not as fixed and immutable, but as a responsive field that human consciousness can directly engage and transform. The ultimate secret that would render external control mechanisms obsolete, if widely understood. As Isis Unveiled concludes, Blavatsky leaves readers with an urgent challenge: to recognize that true wisdom lies not in blind acceptance of either religious dogma or scientific materialism, but in the direct perception of nature's hidden laws through the development of humanity's latent spiritual faculties. The veil can be lifted, not just conceptually, but experientially, by anyone willing to undertake the inner development that reawakens our dormant potential. Isis Unveiled stands today as both warning and revelation, a text whose significance has only grown in the 150 years since its publication. As quantum physics reveals a universe where consciousness and matter appear increasingly inseparable, as ancient practices gain scientific validation, and as institutional systems falter under their own contradictions, Blavatsky's unveiled reality becomes not just plausible, but essential to navigating our planetary transition. The astral light she described resonates with hypotheses in quantum field theory. The interconnection of all life through consciousness finds parallels in emerging research on non-local awareness. The psychophysical phenomena she documented are now being studied in consciousness laboratories worldwide, producing results that challenge the very foundations of materialist science. We stand at a precipice, a moment of choice between continued materialistic descent and spiritual renaissance. The ecological, social, and technological crises converging in our time aren't random, but mathematically predictable aspects of the cosmic cycle Blavatsky mapped. Her work doesn't just explain our predicament, but offers the perspective necessary to transcend it by recognizing that consciousness itself is the primary creative force we must master.
Nature is an open book to those who wish to read it.
Her work serves as both invitation and guide to those who sense that reality is far more extraordinary than we've been permitted to believe, that human potential extends far beyond the artificial limitations imposed by both religious dogma and scientific materialism. For today's seekers of ancient wisdom, Blavatsky's message remains clear. The veil of Isis can be lifted, but only by those willing to develop the inner perception to see beyond conventional limitations. In this sense, her 150-year-old book doesn't merely expose reality's true nature intellectually. It challenges us to transform our own consciousness to perceive that reality directly. If Blavatsky's ideas intrigue you, delve into the source. If you wish to acquire your own copy of Helena Blavatsky's book, Isis Unveiled, follow the link in the description below. This remarkable text has illuminated the path for countless seekers over generations, and its wisdom remains as potent today as when Blavatsky first penned it. The true unveiling, after all, happens not just on the page but within ourselves, as we awaken to the profound reality that Blavatsky sought to reveal, a living, conscious universe waiting to be explored by those with eyes to see beyond the material veil into the deeper dimensions of existence. We kindly invite you to look further beyond the veil of ordinary perception. If this video resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing it with friends who may also be interested in exploring the fascinating world of spiritualism and the occult. Your support helps us create more content that delves into these intriguing topics, fostering a community of curious minds eager to learn and grow together. May the light of wisdom guide your path, and may the unity of all life inspire you to greater compassion and understanding.